it loads it all up at once. And this is turning that off. To see kind of what we get back, same front page, same 10 posts, about 16 megabytes here. So we got our 10 back that we had loaded up, right? To back up, in our scenario of the 4 gigabyte server, this would jump us up from the 40 visitors to about 250. So we're released into multiple digits. Yeah?
What's the baseline before you put in that load of metadata?
I'll show you. We'll get to that. I should have put that first, I suppose. That way, I'll let the cat out of the bag. It was about 5 megabytes per connection. So yeah, 5 into 100, you're talking 20 connections, and then into the 4 gigabytes is like 800 or something like that. Yeah. So the trade-off on this too is once you turn off the Metacache, every time WordPress needs a piece of metadata, normally it would load it all up at once, and then it's all in memory, and it can just take things out here at a time. What the trade-off is, it's going to do a query for each of those individual pieces. So if you had 10 posts and each post had 10 pieces of metadata, it would do 100 queries to try to get those things. So what you're making up for in memory, you're probably going to lose on database performance and speed. Another thing you can do is disable metadata entirely. Also not recommended. This is dangerous. It will do strange things like not display featured images. It won't display attachments. Also, you have to do it in conjunction with turning off the Metacache. You can't just do this all by itself. You have to do that other thing as well. You will get very strange results by doing this. I did try it as part of my exercise just to kind of see what would happen. Don't necessarily recommend it. If you really need to do it, you can kind of do an advanced version by using this same filter and putting a conditional on it. Now this is conditional here is just an example where I'm just saying turn off metadata if you're not in the admin, so you're on the front end. Because once you go into the admin and you turn off metadata, it looks really weird when you go to like your post screen and all the columns are blank next to the post listing. Again, not recommended, it's just for scientific purposes. But we can look at what we get back here. Same example, 10 posts, not loading any of the metadata. Zoom in here, we're taking about 5 megabytes per page load on the home page. So yeah, we do the math on that one with our fictitious server. We're back up to 800 simultaneous connections. That sounded more like normal, at least. All right, let's talk about some best practices. Some things we can do to kind of alleviate some of that pressure without, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. These are some of these things you should be doing regardless of whether or not you're actually having performance problems with your WordPress installation. Number 1, use object caching. I think this is actually the only point in my recommended area. So there's 2 main object caching methods. One is called Memcache, the other one's called Redis. I believe Redis is probably maybe more supported. These are things that... Did I turn myself off? No. These are things that your host will generally provide, and you'll have to check with your host to make sure that these services are available, because they're actually services that run outside of your web server. And usually you can find out by going into your control panel at wherever your website is hosted and just searching for Memcache or Redis, and then turning that thing on. If you're having a hard time finding it, you can always just ask their support team for help, and they'll say yay or nay. Sometimes they might say it's on the next level of service, so if you're paying $5 a month and it costs $7 to get Redis or Memcache, I highly recommend it. So without Memcache or Redis, this is kind of how a normal request happens. Each of these arrows would be like a different visitor coming in at the same time. What happens is they come in, PHP loads up WordPress, does its thing. It actually pulls in all of the metadata into memory. And then once the page is done rendering, it pulls it out of memory. It throws it away effectively. So what happens when you add Redis into the mix is the first person that comes in will load that Metacache, and it'll actually, instead of going into PHP memory, it's off to the side, it's in Redis memory, and everybody that now visits and comes by, they can all share that same pool of data, because it's like, it's not going to change very often. And when it does change, WordPress has hooks that'll, when it changes, Redis knows to automatically update this Metacache. So let's look at an example with Metacache. We do bump our memory back up a little bit because we've added overhead of the code itself. However, we have moved at least the 10 megabytes of metadata into Redis's Metacache, and we're back to about 18 megabytes per page load. At this point, we're looking at 222 simultaneous visitors. Not too bad. So let's talk about architecting a solution. Like, how do we actually attack this problem? We've kind of, rather than just trying to deal with the symptoms, how do we recognize the problem? I use the analogy, like if your head was in a vice, you could continue to take more Tylenol, but why not remove your head from the vice? So let's see what we can do. To do the diagnosis, in my case, like the plugin I was using is called Query Monitor. Very helpful. I don't know if you guys, show of hands, who's heard of Query Monitor? A few of us. Absolutely, if you're having performance problems, this is like one of the first places you should go to like figure out, is it my database? Is it my, why are my pages loading slowly? Do I have errors? It's got a ton of stuff besides just what the title says, query monitoring. It has, stats with PHP, database, a ton of information. Very useful, highly recommended. And then I also did this meta size query to kind of show how you could look at your metadata in total to see if there's a problem. So in this case, and you don't have to write this stuff down because I'll share a link to my slides. In this case, I just went into the database and I'm doing a select, and I'm selecting the meta key here, and the sum of the length of the meta value. So basically I took whatever the text is and the value and said, get the length, and we'll label it as size in this case. And we'll group it by meta key and we'll order it by size. So the big ones are on top. So in this case, the full transcript meta key is 10 megabytes, whereas the other ones are really nothing. They're not going to affect our size at all. So how are we going to fix it? We're going to use the force. Or not. We're going to use the Meta API. Who's heard of the Meta API? All right. So let's look at how the Meta API works. This is a normal WordPress install. You have posts, and then you have post meta. Now think about something like Easy Digital Downloads. Have we heard of Easy Digital Downloads, right? Okay. It's basically a web store, and I'm sure when Pippin was designing it, he thought, well, somebody's going to be selling 10,000 widgets out of their WordPress site. You might not want to muddy up all of their post data and their post meta, which might actually be stories or something else, with 10,000 rows of widgets. And if each widget has another 10 descriptor items, we're talking about 100,000 rows that you've just added to the database. So this is where you want to use the Meta API. And what it allows you to do is have the same structure, which everybody kind of knows and loves, but have it on the side. So you would have products, or whatever your thing is here, and product meta. This could be anything. This could be WP widgets, and this is widget meta, or stories and story meta, or courses and course meta. And what this does is allow you to use kind of the same constructs that you're normally used to using for fetching your data, but it puts it in a different table space, so you're not kind of polluting your normal area. The other thing we could do is use the Meta API and kind of bastardize it a little bit. So in my case, what I did is take the transcript data and remove it from here, and then just put it in a transcript meta table. And it still is going to connect to posts. So you have posts and you have all your normal stuff that you want to do, but this is kind of like the area for the big stuff over here. You don't need to write this down. Don't write it down. I just want to put this up here to let you guys know that the Meta API is a rather low-level API. It's not a drag-and-drop solution. You do have to create a table for the stuff that you want to store separately. This is what that looks like. Again, don't write that down. Just a couple notes, though, before we move on. You'll notice it has a very similar structure to the normal post meta. So you have a meta ID. Instead of a post ID, we have a transcript ID, because I called this thing transcript meta. These things need to match. The table, this like little table bit here, transcript, and that transcript need to match. You have a meta key and a meta value, and everything else is pretty much the same. In my case, where we were kind of using it in that bastardized way where transcript is still attached to post, this needs to be labeled transcript ID, but we're going to store post ID in there. So we're not coming up with a separate ID and having to figure all that stuff out. You also need to register that same table with the wpdb connection. So I'm sure you've all seen functions where somebody declares global wpdb. This is kind of doing the same thing, and it's just saying, hey, there's this new table called transcript meta, and here's where you find it. So wpdb prefix is like wp underscore, and then the name of your table. So this ends up being wp underscore transcript meta. Then we want to move the offending data. So just a quick rundown of how I moved the transcript meta out of the post meta table and into that new table. So you do an insert in a transcript meta, and then you select the data that you want out of the other one at the same time. It all goes very quickly. You for sure want to do this. Select from your new table. Make sure all the data that you want in there is there. And not until you do that do you run the delete to remove it from the other table. And this is how you access it. It looks very similar to what you'd have in a normal WordPress template. Instead of calling get post meta, you call get metadata. And then the only thing that I add here is this transcript string. It's called an object ID. So it knows to go get this full transcript from the transcript metadata table rather than from post meta or user meta. And actually under the hood, you could use this call and say post, or you could say user and substitute a post meta ID or a user meta ID here. And all these arguments are the same as if you were calling get post meta. This is just the post ID. This true just says to return one thing. Otherwise, WordPress will wrap it in an array. WP Autop, that's totally optional. You can kind of ignore the markup and everything around it. That's the meat of it. So let's take a look at some performance things. Going back to our front page, we've got our metadata now in the transcript meta table outside of post meta. We don't have any hacks in place, and we're down to 5 megabytes again. Awesome. Sweet. Now, if you look at the single page, this has got the 1,000 paragraphs of lorem ipsum. We're not really going to be able to avoid the memory load over here. In the case of the courses, I like to think, in his case, it was if you're viewing this course, you're a member and you're behind a paywall, and so they're going to have very few visitors on that. Whereas this listing is public to the world. But once you get to the single, of course, there's 10 megabytes of usage because we've now got the post itself, the meta, everything else that's kind of come with it. Still not bad. So in the process of doing this, I wound up like developing a library to kind of make some of these things easier. The table creation, the registering your table with wpdb. I also added a thing I like to call an intercept, and we can kind of talk about that. So the library is called altmeta. It's available on GitHub, and you can include it as a library. You can install it as a plugin if you want, and have your theme or your plugin that needs to use it. Just include it, and it's really simple. It only needs like 3 lines to use it. So you require it, and then you basically just need to do this. Alt meta is new alt meta, and you tell it the thing that you want it to be. So in my case, it was a transcript. It could be products or whatever. This is optional. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then there's this activation hook to create that table. So what it'll do is when you hit activate, it'll create the extra table that you're looking for. The extra piece over here is what I call the intercept, and I wanted a way so like if you imagine a site that has been deployed and active for a long time, and you had a bunch of that data in post meta, and I don't want to go into all the template files and look for all those get post meta tags and update them to say get metadata transcript. The intercept allows you to use some like creative naming to use the old style function calls just to say get post meta, or in this case update post meta. So what the intercept does is it looks for this like prefix with the underscore and says, hey, instead of putting that into post meta, it intercepts that call and says, don't put that into post meta, put that into transcript meta. So basically it looks for that, and it does this instead. It says update metadata, put that piece of meta in transcript rather than alongside the post. Then you can access your data like you always have been, like this. That is all. I do want to give a plug to Pippin Williamson. If you guys don't know who he is the author of Easy Digital Downloads. He has a great website, Pippin's Plugins, and he has a great tutorial on how the metadata API works, kind of the basis for a lot of the technical details in this talk here. And if you want to check out that meta library, it's there. And if you want to see these slides, they are there. And I'll post these so that you guys can get them through meetup.com. Questions? 5 megabytes, that's the answer.
Go ahead.
Oh, wait, I'll repeat for you. Go ahead.
When you want to post you've got something's been entered and you need to get it into the alternate metadata.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like when you're putting metadata in, and you want to keep the ID? You've done this little trick with the
Yep.
ID as the post ID.
Right, it's the same way. So like if we rewind here, when you're inserting, you would just use the post ID here instead of using a transcript ID or something like that. In like Pippin's world, where he's got like something besides posts, he's got products, he's got a whole separate system that manages products. And so he would say, update metadata, and let's show this guy. He would say update metadata products, and then he would put in his product ID or download ID or whatever it is there. If you're asking about how you would manage it if you've already like done it and then you want to shift towards moving some of that data out.
No, that's what I want to make.
Okay.
So that ID, then it's just post IDs.
Correct. Yep, it's just kind of a way of repurposing it. Yep, so normally that would be transcript ID right there. And we're just gonna kind of happily ignore that and put in the post ID. Yep. Any other questions? No?
Does this method utilize Redis Metacache, or does it go along, or does it avoid it?
It does actually. I don't know if you have options to say like include this thing versus the other thing. And somebody else had asked me a question about searching too. Like, what do you want to do if you want to search this metadata? Because I don't think by default WordPress searches metadata. So you would have to use something like search everything or whatever, and then specifically let it know like, oh, when you're searching post meta, also search this other one on the side too. But yes, I do believe that the caching applies because all of the WordPress internally uses this same system for post meta, user meta. Is that all we get out of the box? I think maybe there's one more. Oh yeah, there you go. Cool. Thank you.
Testing, testing.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll show if I can hear you.
Sounds good.
Make sure you, when you do an external mode, which is 1080p.
Huh?
All wonky on the-
What do you, yeah? Got anything? Yeah. Thanks, I think.
The whole system runs on 1080p, so if you throw in anything else, it kind of freaks out.
Gotcha.
It's working. I started it 10 minutes late, but it's working. It's like in YouTube, so you start the stream and then you
Link out 10 minutes late.
you gotta start it at YouTube, or it doesn't actually start streaming. And it's like, what do you mean? I started streaming over here. So,
How do I
all right,
be normal so I can see right?
right now you're aired. Mm-hmm. You want presenter view?
I just want it to look normal.
Like that?
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to switch out of it a little bit. You know what I mean? Or like a little action.
So if you switch out, I mean, you are normal. You're just,
It's hard to see. Or
yeah,
zoom-
you can just
zoom in.
expand it.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Cool. Sounds good. Hey guys, how is everyone? Everyone hear me? Cool. So my name is Joe Dooley. I just started working here over at LuminFire. I'm a software engineer, and I'm from Tampa, Florida, up here for the week. Today I'm going to do a presentation on WordPress and SEO. It's more so going to be, we're going to switch back from slides and to kind of do live at the same time. The plan today is to go over what needs to be done, you know, when the website's finished, when you're about to hand it over to a client. There's a few extra details that you have to throw in there if you want to get them set up for success. So, this is the itinerary for today. We're going to go over WordPress Yoast plugin. Then we're going to talk about how to set up Google Tag Manager. Then we're going to go into how to set up Search Console, which is formerly known as Google Webmaster Tools. I'm going to show you how to hook into Google Analytics. And then if we have time, we'll move into AdWords and setting up retargeting, etc. Cool. So how familiar are you guys with WordPress and WordPress SEO Yoast plugin? Anybody? Cool. So let's go over here. So what I got here, just a basic site that I just set up. Nothing to it. I'm going to breeze through this part real quick because you guys have said you're pretty familiar. So you have a site finished. It's time to hand it over to client. You want to set them up for success with SEO. There's no point in having a really nice website unless their content's going to be accessible. So there's a couple plugins that are going to make your life a lot easier for WordPress to make that happen. One of them is Yoast SEO, especially the premium version. And another one's going to help you out a lot with setting up Google Tag Manager, and that's going to be this Doriceli Tom's Google Tag Manager setup plugin. So to get started, let's go through Yoast and start the setup process. So the best way to get through the Yoast setup is to just start from the top and make it through all the menus here. Just going to go through here. Features. Talk about it. Your info. So right here, whenever it's asking you for information inside Yoast, it's really important to get this right because this is what the schema data is, and this is what WordPress is, or what Google's actually looking for when it comes to schema, your knowledge graph, etc. So whatever your business name is or your site's name, get that in there right. I'm WP SEO demo today. No alternate name. And then I'm a company or a person. If you choose the wrong thing here, then you're not going to have, you know, your correct business name inside your knowledge graph when you do a search on Google. So sure, absolutely. So a knowledge graph this is really important for local SEO, just to build your brand and have yourself be found on the internet. If you do a search for a company and you don't see this over on the side, this is what we call the knowledge graph, then this means that you're not set up properly for local SEO, which means that you're not utilizing Google to the fullest because this is the first place somebody's going to look for your contact information to contact you especially. Nowadays, you could actually message directly through here, and it will send a message right to your phone through Google Allo. That's pretty neat. In order to set all this up properly, you have to use something called Google My Business, and it's part of the old suite here. So this is for a different profile, but so you have Google My Business here. The idea of this is it's basically Google Plus, but your own personal version. You could chat through it nowadays, so clients, they could reach you directly through the chat feature. You could set up posts. They could see all this right from the side of Google. It's really the first point of action there for your clients to get a good look at you. So let's get back over here to Yoast. So Yoast helps you out by setting all this up correctly. They start out right here. This is the main part with your company or person. And I don't have a logo set up here, so I'll skip that. It's going to bring you to a tab called Webmaster Tools. Are you guys familiar with Google Search Console? Webmaster Tools? Cool. So there's three pieces to setting up a site for SEO. There's Google Search Console, there's Google Analytics, and then there's Google Tag Manager. Tag Manager makes your life easier. Instead of having to put all sorts of tracking tags into your site directly into the PHP templates, you could use Tag Manager and just utilize that, and you'll put your tracking tags inside Tag Manager. It really saves you a lot of time and effort. You're not committing code that's just for tracking tags. It's a really nice way to keep your site clean. So in order to set up these Google Search Console, you have to go through here, and I'll take you through it really quickly. So here's your site they're asking for. It's very important that if your site is if you're running full SSL and it's HTTPS, you actually have to create 4 different profiles. You'd have to create HTTP example.com, you'd have to do HTTP www.example.com, and then HTTPS example.com and HTTPS www.example.com. It's redundant, it's just the way this works. And you also have to make sure that you set your, what's your preference for your URL? Do you want example.com or www.example.com? So this is just asking me to verify what's the best way to do it. They're saying I could upload a verification file, or if you go over to alternate methods over here, you could verify a lot easier just by using your Google Tag Manager, which I just set up before this. Verification failed. Of course it did. This is a... So let's do it the easy way then. So Yoast allows you to set up like this. They're saying, yep. So you could actually just drop this meta tag into Yoast, paste it in, hit save. And Yoast is going to strip out all that junk for you. Then you can click verify. And cool. And so now we own that site. Google knows that we own this URL, and we can start building up our SEO profile for it. So inside here, there's a bunch of different things that you can look at. The idea of Search Console is it's going to give you the actual organic search terms that people are using to get to your site. Google Analytics, they're going to use this data to really narrow down and give you specific search terms. It also helps you analyze landing pages, etc. So there's a couple things that are absolutely essential when you're setting up these profiles, and I'll go through those 4 things right now. The first thing is you want to link it to a Google Analytics property. So I just created this WP SEO demo. I'm just going to click save. I guess I want to associate. That's done. That's step number 1 there. Find our property. There's a couple of them here. Let's see, where did it go? WP SEO demo. Thanks. All right, so once you have that, you have to, let's see, they moved it over here. So let's keep going through. There's international targeting. This is another one of the essential ones. You have to go through and set your country. If you don't do this, Google might show your traffic to people over in Europe. So if you're targeting the United States, you definitely want to do this here. Another thing that you want to do is you want to add your sitemap in here. Google, though, they will be able to find your site and index it, but if you add the sitemap, it makes things a lot easier. So since we're using the Yoast plugin here, we could actually just add that sitemap information directly into it. So in order to get the sitemap URL, you can just look at the URL down there in the corner, which you can't see, but it's always going to be sitemap_index.xml. So we could just drop that into here. And then save it. You could test it first to make sure it works. It's saying it's restricted by robots.txt. So I'm using a Pantheon dev site that I just spun up so that I do that. But normally with your site, you're not going to block it from robots. So that wouldn't happen. So no big deal though. I'm still going to add it and hit submit. Once you add your sitemap, the first thing you'll want to do is you want your content indexed by Google as soon as possible. You could actually come in here and have Google come to your site with its robot and fetch the content. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to do an initial fetch and render. And you could create a new blog post, do this. Within an hour and a half, you'll find your site on that new blog post on Google. It's pretty neat. Again, because we're blocked because of robots, we can't really dig in too far. So that's it for Google Webmaster Tool setup, except you have to create those other 3 accounts. Or one account. Yes? all for, take a look. I mean, look at all these profiles.
All those steps roll for?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you do it all the time, you get pretty quick at it. I mean, you can get them done in like 4 minutes each of them. But, you know, just save that sitemap index in your clipboard and good.
Okay, take a breath.
How's that? Cool. Thanks. Yeah, as you can see, you know, 4 of everything. It's redundant and terrible, but it's been like this at least for 4 years now. Google's made a lot of improvements through analytics and Tag Manager lately, so hopefully this will be one of the next improvements that they come out with.
But if you have your site, you know, forcing people to, like say you're forcing to know www and HTTPS, you still need the other 3?
Absolutely, because you actually have to set up your preferred site the way you want it. And here, I'll show you that right here. So a general rule of thumb is, you know, HTTPS, www, that's like best practice. It looks a lot better sometimes just doing, you know, example.com or example.io, but the www is pretty good, especially because you can redirect, set that out right away. So inside the site settings, there's a preferred domain, and you just have to set this up to what your preference is. You see that there? And again, you'll have to do that for all 4 properties once you're setting it up.
But would you have to do the other stuff like the sitemap and all that, or only on the?
You do have to do it, but if you're just trying to index your blog post and new content you're putting out, just do it on your preferred domain. That's enough right there. You'll notice that, you know, after a couple of months up and running, if you were to look at the search data for these instances here, I mean, the only one that is actually showing you data is going to be your preferred one, which is the www. So that's why you know that's working. Let's see.
I have a question. Could you not turn off the robot step text for this? I don't know if there's implications.
I'd have to pay. It's Pantheon, and it's on a dev site, so I'd have to pay $25 right now for them to remove that.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have a debit card? So. Let's see here. So let's just imagine that we're not doing that today.
Can I ask another question? If we were in theory doing this on a site that we had control over that, is there implications like if I were to turn robots on and tell Google to specifically like go index this as a test, and then I later want to turn it off?
No, there'd be nothing at all there.
So that stuff would be able to go away pretty easily.
Yeah, definitely. And so, you know, that's what these tools are about for Google Webmaster Tools, or Search Console, they call it now. Let me find an active site right here that has some data.
Can I add a little bit more information? Yeah. You can actually contact Google afterwards if you're afraid about that information actually being out there, and they will scrub it.
Okay. So let's get into Webmaster Tools actually. So here's a site that has some data associated to it. First off, it's going to tell you how you're doing and under search appearance. This is your schema data. This is why it's really good if you're working with WordPress to use a framework like Genesis. Because if you do that, you don't have to worry about keeping up with schema data with every new release. It's all going to be done for you. This is pretty phenomenal to just have all this taken care of. This is not a Genesis theme right here. And as you can see, there's 218 errors. So that wouldn't be too fun to fix. I mean, every now and then, if you're using the schema tester, you will find some errors with Genesis, but it's not hard to use their.
So these are errors like in the markup, like if I was going to run it through a.
Correct. So you could actually click on it and drill down to the specific errors.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Rich cards. This is similar to Twitter cards. I don't think it's set up on this property. Data highlighter. That's a tool to create schema data. I don't want to get into that now. There's HTML improvements. This is so basic, these HTML improvements. If Google says something wrong in here, you should get on it pretty quickly because it's really not a lot of data. If they think it's important enough to let you know that there's a problem and you're not fixing it, you should take care of it in here. And this is duplicate title tags, which happens all the time with WordPress because you have categories and tags and you have to know index, etc., which is really what Yoast is for, what makes your life a lot easier. If you're setting up AMP, it lets you know how you're doing performance-wise there. So here's your search analytics. These are going to be your most common organic search terms that are going to your site. Of course, branded keywords are going to be at the top. Branded keywords, that's going to be example.com or whatever your site name is. Unbranded keywords, those are going to be whatever product you're selling, etc. So this is how you actually find backlinks to your site. Backlinks, if you follow SEO, if you're into it all, they say backlinks aren't too much of the equation anymore. In the 90s, that's all it was with backlinks. But it's definitely worth about 50% of that overall SEO equation. Now, this is really important because you have a lot of spammy backlinks a lot of time. These could be bad comments. So you actually want to go in here and purge those out because you could actually get penalties on your site if you have some improper links linked to it. So in order to do that, you could just go through and drill through here. There's definitely some spammy sites that show up here. Why would, let's see, not so many on this first page, but what is sluice.us? That's something that you probably wouldn't want to have in here. Internal links, internal linking, definitely important on your website. This is where you create a blog post and you're talking about, how to work with metadata. This is where you would link to, if you have a page on your site, a services page that talks about, your metadata services. You would want to link to that page, and that creates an internal link. And you're farther creating a web for your content there. And we're lost. Nope, there we go. Manual actions. So have you ever heard a term that, your site's penalized? You have a manual action on there from Google. This is where they actually penalize your site. And this is the only place that you would find out if you had a penalty on your site. Was it within this console? If you have one, then you'll have to go through here, fix it, or hire a firm or SEO agency to take care of it for you. We went through targeting. Then there's mobile usability. This talks about how mobile friendly your site is. So here's the actual index. So this tells you how many pages are indexed on your site. Blocked resources.
I just have to stand by it.
I know.
Let's see if we can get this close enough to pick you up here.
Yeah? How's that? Cool. So blocked resources. So this site as well is on Pantheon, so it's blocking the dev sites. That's what you see here. And here's the actual area where you would remove your URLs. So this is, you could actually de-index content on your web. So let's say you type in your site and below your site, they're showing you sublinks to different parts of your site. And you probably want your contact page up there, but you wouldn't want it to go to one of your author's bio pages as a sublink on the site. So you could actually have this being removed. This is where you would do that. Crawling, like I just said, you could fetch from right here. So all you have to do is hit fetch and render as soon as it loads. Once it does that, it takes a little bit. It's best to just let it fetch, come back in a few seconds. You can check out your crawl errors. This is going to tell you any problems that you have. Soft 404s or not found. Not found errors, they're usually just because of 301 redirects, not doing them properly. A great way to avoid this and never have to think about it is to upgrade Yoast to premium, and it will do it all in the background. So if you change a URL, if you have other people managing content on your site that have no idea what a 301 redirector is, it'll take care of it for you. All in the background. It works perfectly. Crawl stats. So this is going to let you know, when Google is actually sending its robots out to look at your content. When it does that, it's not grabbing all your content at once. So you have to be kind of careful with this. There's a fine balance on your site between too much content and the right content. So you might have a crawl budget on your site of 70%. So Google's only going to come out and get 70% of your content. So you have to be careful because you don't want it to grab your content that's on a tag page on page 11, that's just duplicate content. So this is where site architecture and things like that come into play when you're planning out your WordPress site. Very important. By now, this fetch is probably done. So we can go back, and it's not done yet. No problem. So that's Webmaster Tools, though. That's sort of Search Console. That's the gist of it. It's pretty basic once you do it. If you do it twice, if you do client work or anything like that, you'll remember it forever after the first time.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Can you show me how you navigate to that, to the Search Console? I know like all the icons now.
Yeah. So my best thing was set up a bookmark here.
Okay.
Because, yeah, just do SEO, SEM, and here's all your tools. But, you know, I keep AdWords in here. I keep Search Console. I keep Tag Manager.
Like if I'm logged into my account, let's say it's for my business and I'm using Google Apps or G Suite or whatever.
Yeah. As long as you're logged.
In that, you know, there's like a box of 9 squares.
Yeah, so like when you're inside there, it's pretty neat. They just started this. Actually, just for analytics, I guess we'll do it. But if you go to your analytics and you click on this box, it's not going to be Gmail or anything like that. It's going to be Tag Manager. It's going to be Surveys, which is a great tool now. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Which one of those is the Search Console?
It's not on here. So just remember, it's google.com/webmaster-tools.
Okay.
Webmaster/tools.
That's probably Google Search Console.
Yeah, that's the best way. Cool.
Wait, one more question before you move on to, sorry.
Do you want to come back up?
What's that?
You want to come back up?
No. I want to know if you had like a site that had malware installed and you needed
Yep.
to like remove those, you know, you cleaned it up and you needed to remove those bad URLs.
Yeah.
That's in here too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think I went over here. It's under Index. So remove URLs.
Okay.
This is where you would go for that. And to find out if you have malware problems, you can go to the Security Issues tab here. And it's actually going to list things out right here. So if if somebody's mining Bitcoins because they put a script on your site, this is where they'd show that in. And if you don't fix it, Google essentially de-indexes you until you do fix it. And if that's a business, you know, that could be 50% of your traffic if you strictly rely on organic and you're not doing paid advertising.
Do you have to do them one at a time? Because I've seen sites where it's like they have to create like a hash, you know, like their site name and this hash that nobody recognizes like a word, but then they use those links to.
It's very similar to like the quick edit API where you can bulk select.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's pretty rare that you find this, and depending on, there's people that actually specialize in this. Depending on, you know, how much money you're bringing into your website. If you're bringing in $100,000 a month, you might want to consider, you know, hiring one of those specialized consultants to actually take care of taking off manual actions of your site for Google.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm really going to breeze through Yoast because I find it boring. There are important things though to it. One of the main important things is when it comes to indexing. With WordPress, anybody can create post types. So it can quickly get out of hand, and this kind of ties into what I was saying about crawl budgets and, you know, Google actually finding your most important content. So you could quickly and easily, you know, no index your content directly from this post types and from the taxonomies page. This is going to do it globally, so it'll take care of all of them all at once. So if you don't want your media being indexed, which would be silly, you would just click no index here and save. Then you would go to taxonomies, same concept, cats, tags. Real quick, with categories and tags, it can get really out of hand, especially on client sites. You might see, you know, one post that has 5 categories and 25 tags. Every time you add a tag or an extra category, you're essentially lowering the value of that post. Because if the post is only in one spot, you know, it's worth 100%. But if you have a category and a tag for that, you just lowered it down to where each one of those pages are only worth 33% of the value they had before. So it's super important that you just try to limit that as much as possible. And if you are going to go tag crazy or category crazy, you got to no index it, definitely. And other pages you would want to no index, of course, would be like if it's a WooCommerce site, you would want to no index your checkout page, you know, the thank you page. Things like that, pages that you wouldn't want people going to just out of nowhere, or any type of goal page. Same thing for archives, 404s, other.
So this is the premium version?
No, this is straight up. This is just regular one. To get all these extra menu items right here, there's a setting under dashboard where you have to enable advanced, and that's where it comes from. This next tab here, social, this is really important. This ties into that knowledge graph that we were talking about earlier. So the reason that LuminFire doesn't, these knowledge graphs nowadays, they have your social media links over here. It will tell you the CEO of the company, top employees, etc. So the reason why that's not set up right here is because it's, yeah. So all you have to do, it's really simple. Just put in the URL to your Facebook business page, to your business, Twitter business page, etc. You could probably leave out MySpace.
So when you're adding that kind of information in Yoast SEO,
Yes.
is Yoast updating that Google record about my business?
Absolutely.
Or is Yoast putting something in your HTML that's passing that along?
So Yoast is, it's not in your HTML. It's not like microdata. They're going to use something called JSON LD, which is, here, I'll show you in the homepage here.
Well, JSON LD can end up in your
It's in the head of your markup.
Yeah.
So here's the Yoast. They're really clean about it. So just inspect element. I'll make this a little bigger, or you can see the side. Go to the top here, and it's going to be the first script tag usually. Nope. Maybe it's this guy. Yeah, so here's your JSON LD. This is the company information that I set up earlier. So if you throw in your social media SURL or your social media URLs, it's going to throw it in here as well. And that's going to enable you to have.
Google will pick it up from here.
Correct.
Like popping that into Google.
No, but to get it in there, you have to make sure you're set up in Search Console / Webmaster Tools, and you have to make sure you're indexed and all 4 properties are there, etc. If we go back to Search Console, that index is probably done now. If it's, let's see. All right, cool. So just hit request indexing, tell them you're not a robot, and then if you do crawl only this URL, you're only going to get that. But if you do crawl this and direct links, it's going to crawl your whole entire site. You can only do this 10 times a month, and that is actually for all your clients too. So use it sparingly. So that's it. So now all these URLs are going to be submitted now into Google. It's also going to pick up the schema, the JSON LD for your social media profiles, etc. And you just took care of a lot of it just like that, 20 minutes later. So we go through here, Facebook. You could set this up definitely. This is just gives you additional insights with Facebook's analytics tools. Same thing, these are your Twitter cards. I definitely advise you doing this. Pinterest as well, especially if it, if it's for your type of site. If you have an Etsy shop, you'd want to do Pinterest. Google Plus, very simple. You just throw in your publisher page. This isn't your Google, yes it is nowadays. Disregard. So here's your XML sitemap page. Very important. If you use Yoast for one thing, it should be just for the sitemap. You can go through here. This is for users. I mean, if you have a site that people are following your authors around, you'd probably want to enable your user sitemap. If not, I wouldn't worry about it. Post types, again, do you want to include these in your sitemap? Media. Excluded post types, you could just do this by ID. You guys know how to find the ID of a post just by hovering over the link. Over here in advanced, breadcrumbs or not. If you're using Genesis, you'll never have to worry about this. If you're not using Genesis, you would just enable breadcrumbs, do up your content here, and then copy and paste the Yoast snip into like, content.php, something like that. So permalinks, it's best if you just leave these way. Leave these how they are. There's really no sense in messing with them. Stop words, you can get rid of stop words. Stop words would be small, silly words to the, about, things that just aren't important inside your URLs. Because with URLs, you want to keep them as short as possible. They're short and to the point. And then RSS, if you utilize that, you can mess with it here. Under tools, this is where Yoast is extremely powerful, even in their free version. So you could bulk edit and optimize your site just from this one screen here. You could take care of your titles, and you could take care of your descriptions all in one shot. So this saves you a lot of time. You don't have to actually zero in on all your single post edit screens just to start editing titles and optimizing content. And again, there's, it was on the other tab, but you could do the descriptions up here. And then Search Console, so we could hook this up into there. I'm not going to do it because you guys can do that later. It's just a pop-up window where you have to copy and paste the code. I'm logged into too many different accounts. All right, so has anyone ever heard of Tag Manager, Google Tag Manager? Do you guys use it? So the purpose of this is, have you ever signed up for a service, whether it's HubSpot, Hotjar, some type of tracking tool, where they want you to add a JavaScript code to your site, tracking tags? Well, I mean, especially if you're thinking about a client site, a marketing site, this can really get out of hand, 10, 12 tags. And, you have to worry about them loading in the right order. Is it going to block your content? Is it loading asynchronously? All things that are going to kill your performance. And when it comes to SEO and especially digital advertising, ads, performance of everything really is. So in order to set up, let's see, Tag Manager. So Tag Manager, you could set up a regular Tag Manager account, or there's like a My Client Center type if you're an agency and you want to manage multiple accounts there. So I just set one up briefly to keep this short tonight. But in order to set it up, you just hit Create Account, and then you're going to have to type in the name of the account, WPSEO demo, give it the URL, and then it's just going to give you like a 7-digit code. And it's going to say, actually, throw this script inside the body of your tag, and here's another one for the head of your tag. To make this a lot simpler on yourself, there's a great plugin called Doricelli Tom's Google Tag Manager for WordPress. This plugin is absolutely essential if you're going to set up Tag Manager, because this is actually going to handle the data layer for AdWords. It's going to help you set up retargeting for AdWords. It will help you do everything. It really will. All you have to do is just copy that Google Tag Manager, the ID right here, paste it in here, hit Save Changes. I'm going to use the codeless injection. I wouldn't recommend this on a client site. I would take the time and actually hook into the right hook to output that code. Now, to verify that this is all working and set up correctly, Google provides a tool called Google Tag Assistant. It's a Chrome extension. And as you can see here, it's saying that we have Google Tag Manager. It's set up correctly because it's green. And we have Google Analytics, and that's set up correctly as well. Now, how did I actually add analytics to this site? I didn't do it the traditional way of going inside Analytics and copying this code right here and throw it into my website. All I did was I just copied this tag, the actual tracking ID, and I went inside Google Tag Manager, went directly to the site. So within here, you have tags, which would be what we're trying to do right now. We have triggers. Triggers are which pages do you want to trigger this tag on? Should it be just for the front end of the site, or should it be for all pages? Variables. This is where you can set up a constant for your actual Google Analytics ID, which is what we did here. So all we did was store this in here, and you could hard code it if you want to, but I found it a little easier to do it this way. And then it refers to our Google Analytics tag, which is right here, and I'll show you how we set that up. The tag type that we want here is just going to be a page view. This is the standard Google Analytics setup. If you were doing a WooCommerce site, you'd probably want to do transaction, or if you want to track events, like form submissions and things like that, you would do event tagging. But from there, all you have to do is just select that constant, that variable that we set up is our Google ID, and this is a macro, they call it, within Tag Manager. And then we can click through Advanced real quickly. There's nothing important there. Don't worry about tag sequencing. And then we get to our trigger, and what we're saying is we want to trigger this on all pages of our site. So we want this tag to fire on every single page of our site. And if we want to do exception, if we didn't want to have this fire on the WooCommerce thank you page, all we would have to do is just come in here and create a trigger, or a trigger configuration, and say on DOM ready, which is JavaScript. We just set it up. I'll keep this brief, so we'll skip that part right there. Skip it right there. So you have your tag, and it's created, and we know that by looking at the overview. We see that we see that there's this universal analytics tag. How do we get it onto your site? all you have to do is just click submit from this point, and it's going to create a version just like GitHub would. So where you could actually go back in time if somebody rolled out some bad mistake. And then from there, it's immediately on your site. And I'll show you how this, I'll go through a full example with AdWords right now. So do any of you guys manage AdWords? Interested in AdWords? Use AdWords? Ever touched it? So AdWords, it's, if you have clients that are looking to increase traffic, if they sell products, if you have a client that sells products that are just like on the website and they're not utilizing this, they're throwing money away because all their clients are using this. They're setting up Google Shopping ads. If it's a service business, they want to set up remarketing to where, you know, Google's going to follow you around to remind you that you were on that site and that you're looking at this sweater or whatever. So in order to set up an account here, this is, your account might not look like this. This is a multi-client account, a manager account, but you're just going to enter the site. Demo, it's US. We're not in Tampa time, we're in Central time. Create account. There's our account. Congratulations, you're good to go, yada, yada, yada. So we click on the account. So now, once you create your account, there's a couple things you have to do. The first thing you want to do is you have to link it to Google Analytics. If you don't do that, you can't get the right type of data. So you just go in here to all products, and you can link up Search Console, which is definitely recommended, and right here on not AdSense, but AdWords, close, cancel, no, there we go. So just create a new link group, and then we find this, here's our AdWords account that we just created. Set that guy up, and it's saying, do you want to do auto tagging? I would definitely recommend doing auto tagging. So just click link account. And that's it. So now we just formed a connection between Google Analytics and AdWords, which provides us with these types of features now. Once we go under acquisition, this is how people get to your site. Let me show you what's a site that actually has some data. So we'll click this one, and we'll do unfiltered. By the way, Google Analytics got redone. This is their new interface here. It's supposed to be a lot more user-friendly, material design, etc. Within Analytics here, you have general audience information. These are your demographics. This is like the snapshot view that tells you pretty much everything about your site. This site has an extremely high bounce rate, low pages per session, page views, etc. But the guy converts pretty well. So let's go over to Discover, and then we go to Acquisition, and then we can look at all the traffic. So these are our traffic channels. These are our lead channels. This is how we analyze how well we're doing with organic traffic or our paid traffic. So as you can see here, just by forming that connection to AdWords, we're able to pull in this data here. And here's our paid search data from AdWords. Get rid of this box here. And then we can look at our source, which is just Google here. This would take 8 hours to drill into all these concepts here. But the most important part of it is conversions. If you look at e-commerce, so this data right here, this doesn't just work as soon as you do what I just did. There's tons of setup to this. And this is where that tool, that Doracelli Tom's tool, really comes into play. Because to set all this up normally, I mean, you got to set up data letters. There's JavaScript you have to output into the head of your tags. If you're doing click tracking, etc., just a ton of stuff. So you can go through here and get this set up in about 5 minutes. E-commerce tracking data. Just go through, set that guy up. Go to AdWords here. I'm going to say that we want to set up remarketing. So this is going to create the data layer for you for remarketing. Visitors, I care about that. Search data, definitely. you kind of get the picture here. Social actions. This is going to give us tracking for, did they come to our site from Facebook, Twitter? They're going to give you tracking on if somebody clicks on your social media links for Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Scroll tracking. This will actually track how far down they're reading on your blogs if you wanted to set this up. Integration. So here's your WooCommerce integration. This is how we get all the data inside WooCommerce, and it's some really good data. I'll go into it for a quick second here. But you just go through here and check off these boxes. I like to use the SKU. It's not too confusing. Hit save. And then is there anything else? All right, so that's the setup right there. So now, by doing that, we've just enabled all this amazing data with inside here for e-commerce sites. So right from the overview page that we could see for this past week, the sites had $1,400 in revenue. They have a 50% conversion rate. There's 16 transactions, and they have an average order of $90. Here's the products that they sold individually there. We can look into their behavior. So here's their funnel, their checkout funnel. So here's all the visitors to the site. Here's all the ones that actually saw products. Here's all the ones that made it to the cart. And here's all the ones that made it into the checkout itself, and then with the transaction. So as you can see, it definitely decreases as you go down, but if you look at the abandonments, what cart page abandonments, this is just essential data. If you have a client that's looking for marketing, if you can't set this up properly, then you're not going to be able to give them accurate reporting at the end of the month. And at that point, you have no idea whether you're doing well or not, So, I don't want to take up all night, so does anyone have any specific questions regarding any of this?
Does the Tag Manager plugin work on network sites, multi-site?
Absolutely, it sure does. And just to give you an idea of what Tag Manager does, more of it. So let's create a new tag here, and I won't go all the way into it, but so here's all the services that you could integrate just directly. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever use any of these services, but it's a lot of them. I mean, if you didn't use a service, you would have to drop these JavaScript tags into the head of your site for each one of these. It really adds up. Just the amount of time you'll save on your loads, it's incredible. So, let's see. Questions? Anyone? Cool. Well, guys? Oh.
Does anyone ever browse using anything other than Google anymore?
Yeah, so let's say, I can get you a stat, but let's just ballpark it and say 70% of your traffic will come from Google. So Bing and Yahoo, we'll split that up in between the two there. Bing and Bing, Google Shopping ads, those are high converting. They're cheaper. So depending on your client's budget, most of these clients you want to have them on a retainer. So if they have 40 hours, then it's like the 4th or 5th month that you're working with them. I definitely advise setting something like that up. Bing, set up their webmaster tools, set up an AdWords account for Bing, and go from there. But there's so many more beneficial services out there that will give you a higher ROI before I would get down to that road. Let's see. Well, guys, I appreciate your time tonight. You're welcome.